On Christmas Eve, a woman wept before the Christmas tree. But when a billionaire offered to help, he discovered something unbelievable. Christmas Eve in London was like a living Christmas card. Snowflakes danced gently beneath the golden glow of the streetlights, blanketing Trafalgar Square in a silent white shroud. In the heart of the city, a towering Christmas tree stood tall, its twinkling lights reflecting in the tear-filled eyes of Evelyn Parker. At 62, Evelyn was a solitary figure amidst the festive cheer surrounding her. Her face, etched with time and sorrow, contrasted sharply with the smiling faces of families passing by. Admiring the Christmas decorations, she stood motionless, as if part of the wintry landscape, a lone tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. The distant sounds of laughter and Christmas carols reached her ears, but for Evelyn, the world felt silent. Her mind wandered through memories of a past that seemed to belong to another lifetime, a life long gone. Closing her eyes, Evelyn was transported back 20 years. It was Christmas Eve, and her home overflowed with joy. The aroma of freshly baked gingerbread filled the air, mingling with the scent of the pine tree that adorned the living room. Peter, her husband, smiled as he adjusted the lights on the tree, his eyes sparkling with childlike enthusiasm. "Daddy, a little more to the left." The melodic voice of Amelia, then 15, echoed through the room. She was perched on the sofa, directing the decorating operation with the authority of a tiny general. Her brown hair cascaded in curls over her shoulders, and her smile lit up the room more than all the Christmas lights combined. Evelyn watched the scene, her heart overflowing with love. Her small family was her whole world, and in that moment, it seemed nothing could shatter the happiness they shared. The memory dissipated like smoke in the wind, bringing Evelyn back to the cold, lonely present. She opened her eyes, staring at the Christmas tree in the square. The lights blinked relentlessly, as if mocking her pain. How had things come to this? The question echoed in her mind, an unanswered question that tormented her day and night. The life that once seemed so perfect had crumbled, leaving only ruins and unanswered questions. Amelia, her beloved daughter, had vanished from her life 8 years ago. There was no fight, no explanation. One day, she simply packed her bags and left, leaving only a short, impersonal note. "I need to go. Don't look for me." The words, written with a coldness Evelyn never imagined she'd see in her daughter's handwriting, had pierced her heart like icy daggers. For years, Evelyn and Peter tried to understand, tried to find Amelia. Unanswered calls, returned letters, private investigators who always came back empty-handed. It was as if Amelia had dissolved into thin air, taking with her all the joy and color from her parents' lives. Peter never fully recovered. The cheerful, vibrant man Evelyn had known for decades transformed into a silent, melancholic shadow. He immersed himself in work, spending days and nights at the office of his small accounting firm. Evelyn watched, helpless, as her husband withered before her eyes. 3 years after Amelia's departure, Peter passed away, a heart attack, the doctors said. But Evelyn knew it was more than that. Peter had died of a broken heart, consumed by the inexplicable absence of his only daughter. The funeral was a small, somber affair. Evelyn waited with a mixture of hope and dread for Amelia to appear. But the empty chair beside her in the church remained a cruel reminder of her daughter's absence. It was only after Peter's death that the true extent of their problems came to light. Evelyn discovered, horrified, that her husband's small business was drowning in debt. Apparently, Peter had taken out substantial loans in recent years, using their house as collateral. The revelation was a devastating blow to Evelyn. As if the loss of her daughter and husband wasn't enough, now she faced the possibility of losing her home, the last bastion of her happy memories. As she watched the families in the square, Evelyn felt a pang of envy mixed with profound sadness. How she longed to turn back time, to understand what had happened, what had caused her life to fall apart so completely. A group of carolers began to sing Silent Night near the tree. The soft melody floated in the cold night air, touching something deep within Evelyn. She remembered how she used to sing that song to Amelia when she was little, rocking her to sleep on winter nights. The tears she had fought to contain finally overflowed. Evelyn let herself cry silently, her tears mingling with the gently falling snowflakes. She wept for Peter, for Amelia, for the life she had lost, and for the uncertain future that awaited her. As the tears flowed, Evelyn made a decision. Tomorrow would be Christmas, a day of hope and new beginnings. She couldn't continue living like this, trapped between painful memories and a bleak present. Somehow, she would find the strength to move on. With one last look at the Christmas tree, Evelyn turned and began to walk towards her home, the home that might soon no longer be hers. Her steps were slow and heavy, but there was a newfound determination in her gait. Tomorrow, she would start searching for answers. Tomorrow, she would face the debts and the ghosts of the past. Tomorrow, she would take the first step towards an uncertain, but her own, future. As Evelyn walked away, the snow continued to fall softly on London. The city slumbered on Christmas Eve, unaware of the silent drama unfolding in its streets. And somewhere, perhaps not as far away as it seemed, a young woman named Amelia also looked at the night sky, carrying her own secrets and regrets. The night wore on, carrying with it the final moments of a year filled with loss and revelations. And with the arrival of dawn, a new chapter in Evelyn Parker's life was about to begin. Christmas morning dawned cold and grey in London. The snow from the previous night had turned into slush on the streets, and the overcast sky promised more precipitation. Shops were closed, the streets nearly deserted, with only a few hurried pedestrians braving the biting cold. Amidst this desolate scene, John Thompson walked leisurely, his hands tucked into the pockets of his expensive overcoat. At 65, John was the picture of American success: perfectly trimmed grey hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and an air of confidence that came from decades of thriving in the business world. Retired for 2 years, John had decided to spend the holidays travelling through Europe. London wasn't originally in his plans, but a flight delay to Edinburgh had left him stranded in the city. Now, on Christmas morning, he found himself wandering the empty streets, his thoughts a mixture of melancholy and boredom. That's when he saw her. Sitting on a bench in the square, seemingly oblivious to the cold, was a middle-aged woman. Her slumped shoulders and bowed head were the very picture of despair. As John watched, he saw a tremor run through her body and realized she was crying. Something about the scene touched John deeply. Perhaps it was the woman's evident loneliness, mirroring his own sense of isolation this Christmas away from home. Or maybe it was simply the instinct to help someone clearly in need. Without a second thought, John approached the bench. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in his hesitant English. "Are you all right?" The woman lifted her face, revealing red, swollen eyes from crying. For a moment, she seemed confused, as if she had forgotten where she was. "Yes, no," she stammered, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir, I'm fine." John noticed the tremor in her voice, the way she huddled against the cold. "Say forgive my intrusion," he continued, "but you don't seem all right at all. Is there anything I can do to help?" The woman studied him for a moment, suspicion evident in her eyes. "No, thank you," she finally replied. "There's nothing that can be done." John hesitated. All his business experience told him to respect her refusal and move on. But something prevented him from simply turning his back and walking away. "Look," he said, trying to sound as kind as possible, "it's cold out here. How about we grab a coffee? There's a cafe around the corner that seems to be open. My name is John, by the way. John Thompson." The woman seemed to ponder for a moment, her gaze shifting between John and the cafe he mentioned. Finally, with a small sigh of defeat, she nodded. "Evelyn," she introduced herself as she stood up. "Evelyn Parker." The cafe was a cozy place, with exposed brick walls and the comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. John and Evelyn sat at a table in the back, away from the windows and the few other customers. "So, Evelyn," John began after the waiter brought their coffees, "what brings you out on a cold Christmas morning?" Evelyn stared into her cup, as if the answers to all her troubles could be found in the depths of the dark liquid. "It's complicated," she finally said. John nodded understandingly. The best stories usually are. Something in his tone, a mixture of kindness and genuine interest, seemed to break down Evelyn's last defenses. With a deep sigh, She began to speak. "Today marks exactly 8 years since my daughter Amelia left," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "She just disappeared. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a note saying not to look for her." John leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "That's terrible. You have no idea what happened." Evelyn shook her head. "None. One day she was there, happy, making plans for the future. The next," she made a vague gesture with her hand, "poof, gone." John absorbed the information, his business mind already working through the possibilities. "And the police, private investigators. We tried everything," Evelyn replied, a touch of bitterness in her voice, "but it's like she vanished off the face of the earth." There was a moment of silence as John digested the story. There was something more there, he could sense it. Years of dealing with people had given him a sixth sense for when someone was withholding information. "And your husband?" he asked cautiously. "How did he handle all of this?" A shadow passed over Evelyn's face. "Peter, he couldn't bear it. He passed away 5 years ago. Heart attack." "I'm so sorry," John said softly. Evelyn nodded, silently thanking him. Then, as if realizing she had already revealed too much, she straightened in her chair. "But enough about me," she said, forcing a smile. "What brings an American to London on Christmas?" John recognized the attempt to change the subject, but decided not to press. "Oh, it's a much less interesting story, Quid, I'm afraid. Flight delay, basically. I should be in Edinburgh right now." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Edinburgh, business or pleasure?" "Neither, actually," John replied with a shrug. "Just an old fool trying to escape his own Christmas memories, I suppose." Something in Evelyn's eyes softened at those words. "It seems we have more in common than I thought, Mr. Thompson." John smiled, the first genuine smile he'd given in days. "Please, call me John." The rest of the morning passed in surprisingly easy conversation. Evelyn spoke a little more about her life in London, her work as a retired literature professor, the small joys of living in a city so rich in history and culture. John, in turn, shared stories of his travels, funny anecdotes from his years in business, carefully avoiding any mention of his considerable wealth. It was only when the clock in the square struck noon that they realized how much time had passed. Evelyn seemed momentarily alarmed. "Oh dear," she exclaimed. "Dear, I didn't mean to take up so much of your time, John." "Don't worry," he reassured her. "It's been a pleasure. In fact—" He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight. Being Christmas and all, Kahas, I thought we could keep each other company." Evelyn seemed surprised by the invitation, a mixture of emotions flitting across her face. For a moment, John feared he had overstepped some invisible boundary. I don't know," Evelyn said finally. "It's very kind of you, but I completely understand if you'd prefer to be alone," John hastened to say. "I didn't mean to pressure you." Evelyn studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decipher some hidden riddle in his features. Then, to John's surprise, she smiled. "You know what, why not?" she said. "I think I've spent enough time alone this Christmas." As they finalized the dinner plans, neither of them could imagine how this chance encounter on a cold Christmas morning would change their lives forever. For sometimes, it's in the most unexpected moments that we find the connections that will help us face our greatest challenges and unravel the deepest mysteries of our lives. Christmas dinner at the Savoy, one of London's finest restaurants, was in full swing. Soft lights danced in the crystal glasses, and the aroma of elaborate dishes hung in the air. John and Evelyn sat at a discreet table in the corner, the soft murmur of their voices almost lost amidst the festive buzz of the place. Evelyn looked around, marveling. "John, it's too much. I'm not dressed appropriately for a place like this." John smiled, waving his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You look perfect. Besides, it's Christmas. We deserve a little extravagance, don't we?" As they savored their dinner, the conversation flowed naturally, as if they were old friends reuniting after years of separation. John listened attentively as Evelyn, emboldened by the wine and the warm atmosphere, revealed more details about her situation. "And then, after Peter passed away, I discovered all this debt," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion. The house, well, I'm going to lose it soon. I have no way to pay back everything he owed. John felt a pang in his chest. Evelyn's story touched him deeply, evoking memories of his own life, of choices he too regretted. Evelyn, he said softly, placing his hand over hers. What if I could help with that? Evelyn looked up, confused. Help? What do you mean? John took a deep breath, knowing what he was about to say might sound absurd. I could pay off your debts. All of them. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn stared at John as if he had suddenly grown a second head. You... what? She finally managed to say. John, that's crazy. You barely know me. Why would you do something like that? John leaned back in his chair, a sad smile playing on his lips. Perhaps because I see a bit of myself in you, Evelyn. Someone who made mistakes, who lost important people, who is struggling to make things right. Evelyn shook her head, still stunned. But, no, I can't accept that. It's too much, and, frankly, a little suspicious. No offense. None taken, John chuckled softly. Actually, I'm glad you're cautious. It shows good sense. He paused, taking a sip of his wine, as if gathering courage for what he was about to say next. Look, Evelyn, I'll be completely honest with you. I have a selfish reason for wanting to help you. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her posture becoming more tense. And what would that be? John sighed deeply. I have a daughter, here in England. A daughter I haven't seen in, well, decades. The revelation hung between them, heavy as lead. Evelyn studied John's face, seeing for the first time the lines of sadness and regret etched deep into his features. What happened? She asked softly. John ran a hand through his grey hair, a gesture that betrayed his nervousness. Jam, it's a long story, but the short version is, I was young, ambitious, and stupid. I put my career above everything, including my family. When I finally realized my mistake, it was too late. She wanted nothing to do with me. Evelyn nodded slowly, understanding. And what does that have to do with me? Well, John continued, leaning forward, I thought we could make a deal. I help you with your debts, and in return, you help me reconnect with my daughter. Evelyn frowned, confused. But how could I help? I don't know your daughter. No, but you know England, the culture, the nuances that an American like me might miss. Besides, he added with a sad smile, you understand the pain of being separated from a daughter. I thought maybe we could help each other. Evelyn remained silent for a long moment, absorbing everything John had said. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately, to tell him it was crazy, that she couldn't accept such an offer from a stranger. But another part, a part she barely recognized, felt a spark of hope. John, she finally said, her voice trembling, this is a lot to process. I don't even know where to begin. John nodded understandingly. I know. It's a crazy proposition, isn't it? But Evelyn, think about it. What if by helping each other, we could somehow fix the mistakes of the past? What if we could find a way back to our daughters? Evelyn felt tears welling up in her eyes. The idea was so tempting, so full of possibilities. Your daughter, she asked softly. What's her name? John smiled, a smile filled with love and regret. Clara. Her name is Clara. Evelyn nodded, letting the name echo in her mind. Clara. Somehow, knowing the name made it all more real, more tangible. And how long has it been since you last saw her? John lowered his eyes, shame evident in his posture. 25 years. She was only 10 when I left. Evelyn let out a shaky breath. Oh, John. He looked up, his eyes shining with a mixture of hope and fear. So, what do you say, Evelyn? Want to join me in this madness? Evelyn looked out the restaurant window, watching the Christmas lights twinkling outside. Somewhere in this vast city, or perhaps beyond, were Amelia and Clara, two daughters lost to parents who yearned for a second chance. Turning back to John, Evelyn saw in him a reflection of her own pain, her own hope, and in that moment she made her decision. Yes, she said softly, a small smile forming on her lips. Yes, John, let's do this. John let out a sigh of relief, a genuine smile lighting up his face. Evelyn, You don't know how much this means to me." As they toasted their unlikely new partnership, neither of them could foresee the twists, challenges, and revelations that awaited them. But on that Christmas night, in an elegant London restaurant, two lonely souls found a new purpose and, perhaps, the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever. The waiter approached to clear their plates, momentarily interrupting their conversation. When he'd gone, John leaned forward, his eyes shining with renewed determination. "So, where do we begin?" he asked. Evelyn thought for a moment. "Well, I suppose the first step is to gather all the information we have about Clara, about her last known whereabouts. And perhaps we can look for Amelia at the same time." John nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Two birds, one stone. Who knows? Maybe there's a connection we're not seeing." As they discussed the next steps, formulating plans and strategies, the atmosphere around them seemed to vibrate with a new energy. Christmas, which had begun so bleakly for both of them, now shimmered with the promise of a new beginning. Outside, the snow began to fall again, blanketing London in a pristine white coat. It was as if the universe itself was offering a blank canvas, ready for John and Evelyn to write the next chapter of their lives. And so, amidst laughter, plans, and a touch of apprehension, an unlikely partnership was born. Two strangers united by extraordinary circumstances, embarking on a journey that promised to challenge everything they thought they knew about family, forgiveness, and redemption. What the future held for them only time would tell, but on that night, at least, there was hope. And sometimes, that's all we need to take the first step towards a new tomorrow. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Evelyn's small flat, illuminating a scene of intense concentration. Sitting at the kitchen table, Evelyn leafed through old photo albums, while John, hunched over his laptop, typed furiously. "So," Evelyn began, breaking the silence, "do you really think we can find them? Clara and Amelia?" John looked up from his screen, a determined smile on his face. "We have to believe, Evelyn. It's all we have left." Evelyn nodded, turning her attention back to one particular photo, Amelia at 18 smiling radiantly at her high school graduation. "I just wish I understood why she left," she murmured. John closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, his eyes lost in distant memories. "Sometimes, Evelyn, the reasons why people walk away are more complex than we can imagine." His melancholic tone made Evelyn look at him with curiosity. "Tell me about Clara, John. What was your relationship like before everything?" John sighed deeply, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were clouded with regret. "I was a different man back then," he began. "Obsessed with success, with the next big acquisition, the next million." John's mind transported him back to a particularly painful day, 26 years ago. John's Manhattan office buzzed with activity. Phones rang incessantly, assistants scurried back and forth with stacks of documents, and at the center of it all was John Thompson, the corporate shark, orchestrating his latest hostile takeover. "Daddy?" A small, hesitant voice interrupted his concentration. John looked up, irritated, to see his 9-year-old daughter, Clara, standing in the doorway of his office, holding a colorful drawing. "Clara, how many times have I told you not to interrupt me when I'm working?" he scolded. The little girl's eyes filled with tears. "But Daddy, you promised to come to my piano recital today." "It starts in an hour." John glanced at his watch, cursing under his breath. He had completely forgotten. "Honey, I'm so sorry, but I won't be able to make it. This deal is too important and—" "More important than me," Clara interrupted, her voice trembling. The question hit John like a punch to the gutter, but before he could respond, his phone rang again. Instinctively, he answered. When he looked back at the doorway, Clara was gone, leaving behind only the drawing lying on the floor, a portrait of the family they used to be. "That was the last time I saw Clara smile at me," John concluded, his voice thick with emotion. "After that, she shut down completely, and I just kept doing what I always did. I buried myself deeper in work." Evelyn reached out, gently touching John's arm. "You were young, John. We all make mistakes." "Yes, but my mistakes cost me my family," he replied bitterly. When I finally realized what I was losing, it was too late. Clara and her mother had already left for England, and I was alone with my empty empire. Silence fell between them, heavy with the weight of shared confessions and regrets. Finally, Evelyn stood up, determination shining in her eyes. Well, we can't change the past, but we can try to fix the future. I'm going to start making some calls, see if I can get any leads on Clara's whereabouts. John nodded gratefully. Thank you, Evelyn. I don't know what I'd do without you. As Evelyn moved around the flat, making calls and taking notes, John couldn't help but notice how much more alive, more focused she seemed than when he'd met her just a few days ago. It was as if this shared mission had ignited a flame within her. The hours passed quickly, with Evelyn tapping into her network of contacts, former students, fellow teachers, even a retired private investigator she knew. John, meanwhile, scoured the internet, searching for any mention of Clara or Amelia on social media, news sites, anything that might provide a clue. It was late in the afternoon when the doorbell rang, startling them both. Evelyn answered it, returning moments later with a worried expression. It was my neighbor, Margaret, she explained. She wanted to know if everything was all right. Apparently, she's noticed a strange man coming and going from my flat over the past few days. John frowned. Is she suspicious of me? Evelyn nodded reluctantly. Margaret is, well, she's protective. Ever since Peter passed away, she's sort of taken on the role of unofficial guardian. I understand, John said, a knowing smile forming on his lips. She cares about you, that's good. Yes, but... Evelyn hesitated. John, maybe we should be more discreet. If people start asking questions... John stood up, placing his hands on Evelyn's shoulders. Hey, we have nothing to hide. We're just two friends working together on a project. There's nothing wrong with that. Evelyn nodded, but John could see the worry still lingering in her eyes. He knew the situation was delicate. Here he was, a strange American, suddenly involved in the life of an English widow. It was natural for people to ask questions, to jump to conclusions. Look, he said softly, if you want me to back off for a while, I understand. The last thing I want is to cause trouble for you. Evelyn shook her head vehemently. No, John, we're in this together, remember? I'm not going to give up just because some nosy neighbors are curious. A genuine smile lit up John's face. Thank you, Evelyn. Your loyalty means a lot to me. At that moment, Evelyn's phone rang. She answered it quickly, her expression changing from curiosity to shock as she listened. I see, yes, thank you for letting me know, she said before hanging up. John looked at her anxiously. What is it? Any news? Evelyn turned to him, her eyes wide. It was my friend, the retired detective. He said he may have found a lead on Clara, a woman with her name working at an art gallery in London. John's heart leaped. London, that's incredible. We have to go there immediately. Evelyn nodded, but there was a hesitation in her movements. John, what if she doesn't want to see us? John paused, the reality of the situation hitting him with full force. After all these years, he finally had a concrete lead on his daughter's whereabouts. But Evelyn was right. There was no guarantee that Clara would want to see him, let alone forgive him. There's only one way to find out, he said finally, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. We're in this together, right? Evelyn smiled, reaching out to take his hand. Together, she agreed. As they began making plans for their trip across town, neither of them noticed the figure of Margaret, watching from the window of the flat next door, her face a mask of worry and suspicion. The secrets of the past were about to surface, and the consequences promised to be nothing short of extraordinary. Dawn in London brought with it a nervous energy that hung in the air like a thick fog. Evelyn woke up before her alarm even went off, her heart racing with the prospect of what the day might bring. She found John already in the kitchen, the dark circles under his eyes revealing a sleepless night. Morning, Evelyn murmured, pouring herself a cup of tea. Ready for today? John nodded, his expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. As ready as I'll ever be. They had planned carefully over the past few days, gathering information and strategizing. Now, finally, it was time to put everything into action. The gallery where Clara supposedly worked was located in the city centre, a modern building of glass and steel that stood out amongst the older structures surrounding it. Evelyn and John positioned themselves in a cafe across the street, carefully observing the entrance. The hours dragged on. Evelyn noticed John growing increasingly tense, his eyes darting to every brunette woman who passed by. "Easy," she whispered, placing a comforting hand on his. "We'll find her." It was late in the afternoon when they saw her. An elegant woman, with brown hair pulled back in a messy bun, emerged from the building carrying a stack of portfolios. Even from a distance, the resemblance to John was undeniable. "That's her," John whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "That's my Clara." Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. Seeing the recognition in John's eyes, the mixture of love and regret in his expression, brought her own repressed emotions about Amelia to the surface. Clara walked towards a nearby parked car, placing the portfolios in the back seat. John made to stand up, but Evelyn gently restrained him. "Wait," she said, "we can't just approach her like this. We need to be careful." Reluctantly, John agreed. They watched in silence as Clara got into the car and drove away. In the days that followed, Evelyn threw herself into the investigation with fierce determination. She spoke with local shopkeepers, frequented the cafe near Clara's gallery, and even managed to exchange a few words with one of her colleagues. It was through this colleague that the most surprising revelation came. "Clara? Oh, she's wonderful," the woman had said. "So dedicated to her work with foster children. You should see how her eyes light up when she manages to match a child with a loving family." When Evelyn shared this information with John, she saw a myriad of emotions cross his face. Surprise, pride, and a deep sadness. "Foster children," he murmured. I guess she found a way to give other children what she felt was missing in her own life." As the days passed and they gathered more information about Clara's life, Evelyn found herself wrestling with her own insecurities. Here she was, helping John reconnect with his daughter, while Amelia remained a distant mystery. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. One evening, as they reviewed their notes, John noticed Evelyn's pensive silence. "Hey," he said softly, "are you all right?" Evelyn hesitated before answering. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. What if I'm projecting my own hopes onto your situation?" John studied her for a moment before speaking. "Evelyn, you've been my rock on this journey. Without you, I would never have gotten this close to Clara. But I understand your doubts. Believe me, I have them too." He paused, seeming to carefully choose his next words. Maybe it's time we took the next step. To actually talk to Clara." Evelyn felt her heart quicken at the suggestion. "Are you sure? Don't you think we need more time to prepare?" John shook his head. "I think the longer we wait, the harder it will be. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I have you by my side. What could possibly go wrong?" Evelyn couldn't help but smile back, despite her nervousness. "All right, then, tomorrow. We'll talk to Clara tomorrow." As they prepared for bed that night, both of them felt the weight of the decision they had made. Tomorrow could change everything, for better or for worse. Across town, Clara closed another file, exhausted after a long day at work. She had no idea that, in less than 24 hours, her world would be turned upside down by the reappearance of a long-absent father and a stranger carrying her own secrets. Fate was about to intertwine 3 lives in ways none of them could have predicted, and the revelations that would follow promised to shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about family, forgiveness, and redemption. The little Venice cafe was almost empty that rainy afternoon. Evelyn nervously watched the rain through the misted window, her heart pounding against her chest. Beside her, John sat like a statue, stiff and pale, his eyes fixed on the entrance. "She'll come," Evelyn whispered, more to herself than to John. It had been a challenge to convince Clara to agree to this meeting. Evelyn had used all her persuasive powers, introducing herself as an old family friend who wanted to reunite father and daughter. The lie weighed heavily on her conscience, but she clung to the hope that the end would justify the means. The bell above the door chimed and they both turned sharply. Clara entered, shaking the rain from her umbrella. Her eyes scanned the cafe until they landed on the table where they were sitting. For a moment, she seemed frozen in place, the shock evident on her face as she recognized John. "Clara," John murmured, rising hesitantly to his feet. Clara advanced slowly, her eyes never leaving her father's face. When she spoke, her voice was as cold as ice. "So this is it. After all these years, you just decide to show up." John swallowed hard. "Clara, I know there's no excuse in the world for—" "You're right," Clara interrupted sharply. "There isn't." Evelyn watched the scene unfold, feeling like an intruder. Clara's resentment was palpable, years of pain and abandonment condensed into each sharp word she hurled at John. "Why now?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why after all this time?" John glanced at Evelyn, seeking support, before turning back to his daughter. "Because I finally realized how foolish I've been, how much I've lost. Clara, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'd like the chance to explain, to try and make things right." Clara laughed bitterly. "Make things right? You think you can just fix 25 years of absence?" The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn watched father and daughter face each other, years of hurt and regret hanging between them like a heavy curtain. Finally, Clara sighed, seeming to deflate slightly. "Look, I don't know why I agreed to come here. Maybe a part of me wanted answers, but the truth is my life has moved on. I've built something for myself. Without you." John nodded slowly, the pain evident in his eyes. "I understand. You have every right to hate me, Clara. I just want you to know that I'm proud of the woman you've become. I heard about your work with foster children. It's incredible." Something in Clara's expression shifted at those words, a flicker of surprise and something softer, almost vulnerable. "How do you know about that?" she asked. It was Evelyn who answered, sensing it was time to step in. We did some research before contacting you. We wanted to understand your life now." Clara studied Evelyn with curiosity. "So, and who are you exactly, in all of this?" Evelyn hesitated, but before she could answer, Clara continued, "It doesn't matter. Look, I appreciate the effort, I really do, but you can't just show up and expect everything to magically resolve itself. There's more at stake than just me." John frowned, confused. "Darcy, what do you mean?" Clara took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I have a daughter. Your granddaughter? She's 5 years old, and her name is Sophia." The revelation hit John like a thunderbolt. He swayed slightly, steadying himself against the table. "So I have a granddaughter." Evelyn watched the emotions play across John's face. Shock, joy, sadness for all the lost time. Clara, in turn, seemed to be wrestling with her own conflicting emotions. "Yes," she said softly. "And it's because of her that I can't just let you waltz back into our lives as if nothing happened. I need to protect her." John nodded, unshed tears glistening in his eyes. "I understand, Clara. I really do. Just give me a chance. Please." The moment was interrupted by the shrill ringing of Evelyn's phone. She reached for it, ready to silence it, but froze when she saw the name on the screen. "Excuse me," she murmured, moving away from the table. "Hello," Evelyn answered, her voice trembling. The voice on the other end belonged to her old detective friend. "Evelyn, I think we found something. A woman matching Amelia's description was seen in Brighton last week." Evelyn's heart leaped. Brighton, after all these years. Finally a concrete lead. When she turned back to the table, she saw John and Clara still talking, their voices low and intense. The scene before her, combined with the news she had just received, made Evelyn realize that this journey was far from over. In fact, it seemed it was only just beginning. Rain fell softly outside Evelyn's small flat, creating a steady rhythm against the windows. Inside, the silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional clink of the teacup Evelyn held in trembling hands. John watched her from across the room, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Evelyn," he began, his voice soft but firm, "why didn't you tell me about the letters?" Evelyn closed her eyes, memories flooding her mind. 5 years ago, Peter lay in a hospital bed, his frail body battling the cancer that was consuming him. Evelyn sat beside him, holding his hand, when the postman arrived with a letter addressed to Peter. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope, instantly recognizing Amelia's handwriting. Her eyes scanned the lines, her heart quickening with each word. "Dad, I'm so sorry for everything. I know you must be disappointed in me, but I need you to understand I'm pregnant. The baby's father wants nothing to do with us. I'm scared, but determined to move forward. Please don't look for me. I need to do this on my own. With love, Amelia." Evelyn looked at Peter, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the bombshell that had just landed in her lap. With a heavy heart, she folded the letter and tucked it into her purse. In the weeks that followed, more letters arrived. Amelia recounting the birth of her child, her struggles and small victories, and with each letter, Evelyn made the same choice, to hide the truth from Peter, protecting him from what she believed would destroy him in his final days. Back in the present, Evelyn opened her eyes, meeting John's questioning gaze. I thought I was protecting him," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Peter was so ill, so fragile. I feared the news of Amelia's pregnancy, of her struggles, would be too much for him to bear." John moved closer, sitting beside her on the sofa. "But why didn't you tell me about this when we started our search? This information could have helped us find Amelia sooner." Evelyn lowered her gaze, shame evident in her face. "I was afraid, John, afraid that if you knew I had more information about Amelia, you wouldn't need me anymore, that you would go on alone and I would be left behind alone again." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. John stood up, walking over to the window, his silhouette outlined against the rain outside. "Evelyn," he said finally, his voice calm but with an edge of hurt. "I thought we trusted each other. We're in this together, remember?" Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "I know, John, and I deeply regret it. It's just, after losing Peter, after Amelia left, I couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone else." John turned to face her, his eyes softening slightly. "I understand fear, Evelyn, but withholding information, it complicates things. What if there are other things you're not telling me?" Evelyn shook her head vehemently. "There aren't, John. I swear. You know everything now." John studied her for a long moment, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Finally, he let out a long sigh. "Okay," he said, resuming his seat beside her. "I believe you. But from now on, we need to be completely honest with each other. No secrets, no omissions. Is that clear?" Evelyn nodded, relief flooding her body. "Crystal clear, John, I promise." John took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "Evelyn, you're not alone in this. No matter what happens, we're in this together. We'll find Amelia and her child. And maybe, in the process, we can heal some old wounds." Evelyn felt a surge of gratitude and affection for this man who, in such a short time, had become such a crucial part of her life. "Thank you, John, for understanding, for not giving up." John smiled softly. "Us parents who've made mistakes, we need to stick together, don't we?" Evelyn chuckled softly, feeling some of the tension dissipate. "Yes, I suppose we do." As the rain continued outside, Evelyn and John spent the next few hours reviewing Amelia's letters, searching for clues they might have missed before. The trust between them, though shaken, was slowly beginning to rebuild. And somewhere, perhaps not as far away as they thought, Amelia and her daughter lived their lives, unaware of the search that was about to catch up to them. Fate, ever unpredictable, was preparing another twist in this story of secrets, forgiveness, and redemption. The park was filled with children's laughter, and the aroma of candy floss hung in the air. John nervously adjusted his tie for the 10th time as he watched the carousel spin. Clara had finally agreed to let him meet Sophia, his 5-year-old granddaughter, but the meeting would be on neutral ground and on her terms. "Dad," Clara's voice startled him. She approached, holding the hand of a little girl with golden hair and curious eyes. "This is Sophia." John felt his heart quicken. Kneeling down to be at the child's level, he smiled gently. "Hello, Sophia. I'm your grandfather." Sophia studied him for a moment before smiling shyly. Do you like carousels, Grandpa? The word Grandpa hit John like a wave of emotion. I'd love to ride the carousel with you, sweetheart. As John and Sophia headed towards the carousel, Clara watched them with a mixture of apprehension and hope. It was the beginning of a difficult but necessary reconciliation. Across town, Evelyn walked through a run-down neighborhood, her heart pounding in her chest. The lead on Amelia in Brighton had led her back to London, to a small flat in a dilapidated building. Pausing in front of number 23, Evelyn took a deep breath before knocking. The sound of footsteps approached, and then the door opened. Amelia stood there, her eyes widening in shock. Thinner than Evelyn remembered, with dark circles under her eyes, and visibly pregnant. "Mum!" Amelia's voice was a disbelieving whisper. "Amelia, my darling," Evelyn began, tears welling up in her eyes. But before she could continue, Amelia's expression hardened. "What are you doing here? You? How did you find me?" Evelyn took a step forward, instinctively wanting to embrace her daughter Trut, but Amelia recoiled. "I never stopped looking for you, darling. No," Amelia interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "You have no right to show up like this. Not after what happened with Dad." Evelyn felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. "Amelia, please, let me explain. Your father—" "He died thinking I hated him," Amelia cried, tears streaming down her face. "You hid my letters from him. You deprived him of knowing about his granddaughter. How could you?" The guilt Evelyn had carried for years threatened to crush her. I thought I was protecting him. He was so ill, Amelia. I feared the truth might what? Give him a reason to fight." Amelia shook her head, one hand protectively over her belly. "Just go, Mum. I don't want you in my life, or in the lives of my children." The door slammed shut, leaving Evelyn alone in the hallway, silent tears streaming down her face. John sat on a park bench, watching Sophia play in the sandbox. When he saw Evelyn approach, he immediately sensed something was wrong. "Evelyn? What happened?" She sat beside him, looking defeated. In a low voice, Evelyn recounted her encounter with Amelia. John listened silently, his heart heavy with his friend's pain. When she finished, he placed a comforting arm around her shoulders. "Evelyn, look," he said softly, gesturing towards Clara, who was helping Sophia build a sandcastle. "A week ago, I thought I'd never see my daughter again, that I'd never meet my granddaughter, and now here we are." Evelyn looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean that forgiveness, reconciliation, they take time. Amelia is hurt just like Clara was, but that doesn't mean it's the end." Evelyn let out a shaky breath. "But what if it's too late? What if I've lost my chance?" John smiled gently. "It's never too late for love, Evelyn. Trust me, I know. The important thing is not to give up." At that moment, Sophia ran over to them, her eyes shining with excitement. Grandpa, come see my castle." John stood up, extending a hand to Evelyn. "Shall we? I think we could all use a little sandcastle magic right now." Evelyn hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. As they walked towards the sandbox, she felt a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. Maybe John was right. Maybe it wasn't too late. And maybe, just like sandcastles that are knocked down and rebuilt, broken relationships could be mended, one grain at a time. The road to reconciliation would be long and difficult for both John and Evelyn. But in that moment, surrounded by a child's laughter and the promise of new beginnings, they both felt they were taking the first steps in the right direction. Christmas Eve arrived, bringing with it a mix of anticipation and apprehension. John, his hands unsteady with age but firm in their purpose, arranged the dinner table in his home. Each piece of silverware, each plate, each Christmas decoration was placed with meticulous care, as if the perfect arrangement could somehow guarantee the success of the evening to come. The aroma of roast turkey and potatoes au gratin filled the air, mingling with the pine scent of the Christmas tree in the corner of the room. John stepped back, admiring his work. The table was set for 5. Himself, Chu, his daughter Clara, Evelyn, Amelia, and, well, the 5th place setting was a sort of silent tribute to Margaret, who should have been there but whose presence would only be felt in the memories and hearts of those present. The sound of the doorbell cut through the silence, making John jump slightly. He took a deep breath, smoothed down the red Christmas sweater he was wearing, and went to the door. Clara stood there, smiling nervously, holding a bottle of red wine. "Merry Christmas, Grandpa," she said, hugging him tightly. "Merry Christmas, my dear," John replied, feeling a lump in his throat. Come in, come in. You're the first to arrive." Clara stepped inside, her eyes scanning the decorated room. "It's beautiful, Grandpa. You've outdone yourself this year." John shrugged, a shy smile playing on his lips. "Well, it's a special occasion, isn't it?" Before Clara could respond, the doorbell rang again. John opened the door, revealing Evelyn and Amelia. Both women looked tense, Amelia especially, her arms crossed and her gaze fixed on the floor. "Merry Christmas," Evelyn said softly, offering a hesitant smile. "Merry Christmas," John replied, stepping aside to let them in. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." The initial tension was palpable. Clara greeted Evelyn and Amelia politely, but there was a stiffness in her posture that betrayed her discomfort. Amelia barely made eye contact with anyone, fixing her gaze on various objects around the room as if they were the most fascinating things in the world. John cleared his throat, breaking the awkward silence. "Well, how about we sit down? Dinner is ready." Everyone settled around the table, the clinking of cutlery against plates the only sound for a few moments. John looked around at the tense, averted faces and felt a surge of determination. He wouldn't let this night, this opportunity, slip through his fingers. "Before we begin," he said, his voice firm despite his age, "I'd like to say a few words." All eyes turned to him, some surprised, others apprehensive. "I know it hasn't been easy for any of us. We lost Margaret, and with her, it feels like we lost a bit of ourselves too. But look at us now, all gathered here. This is a Christmas miracle." Tears glistened in Clara's eyes. Evelyn pressed her lips together, overcome with emotion. Even Amelia looked up, her eyes meeting John's for the first time that evening. "I want to apologize," John continued, his voice thick with emotion, "to all of you, for not being the father, the grandfather, the friend you deserved, for shutting myself away in my grief and pushing everyone away." Clara reached out, taking her grandfather's hand. "Oh, Grandpa," John smiled through his tears, "and I want to thank you for being here, for giving me this chance." A silence fell over the table, but this time it wasn't heavy or uncomfortable. It was a silence of reflection, of emotions being processed. It was Evelyn who spoke next, her voice trembling but determined. "I also need to apologize," she said, looking directly at Amelia. "My darling, I made mistakes. Mistakes that hurt you deeply." Amelia stared at her mother, a mixture of surprise and suspicion on her face. Evelyn continued, The letters you found. I need to tell you the truth about them." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Clara and John exchanged quick glances, aware that they were about to witness something deeply personal. "Those letters," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wrote them, yes, but not to a lover as you thought they were to your sister." Amelia gasped, her eyes widening. My sister," Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You had a twin sister, Amelia. She didn't survive childbirth. I wrote those letters as a way to cope with the grief, to maintain a connection with the daughter I lost." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt on the table. Amelia looked stunned, unable to fully process what she had just heard. Why did you never tell me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice choked with emotion. Evelyn reached across the table, gently touching Amelia's fingers. "I wanted to protect you from the pain. I thought it would be better if you didn't know, but I see now that this secret only drove us apart." Amelia didn't pull her hand away. Silent tears streamed down her face as she digested the truth. Years of resentment, of feeling betrayed and abandoned, began to dissolve under the light of this new understanding. John and Clara watched in silence, witnesses to this moment of reconciliation. The heavy air from before had transformed into something lighter, more hopeful. I don't know what to say," Amelia finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "I spent so long being angry, feeling betrayed, and now we have a chance to start over," Evelyn finished softly. "If you want." Amelia nodded slowly, a small smile gracing her lips. "I do. I really do, Mum." The moment was interrupted by the shrill ringing of a mobile phone. Evelyn flinched, pulling the device from her pocket. She glanced at the screen and her face paled visibly. "Excuse me," she murmured, rising quickly and stepping out into the hallway. The others exchanged confused glances. Evelyn's voice could be heard, low and agitated, though the words were indistinguishable. When she returned, minutes later, she was visibly shaken. Her hands trembled slightly, and there was an expression of shock etched on her face. "Are you all right, Mum?" Amelia asked, concern evident in her voice. Evelyn forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, darling, just unexpected news. Nothing to worry about right now." But it was clear to everyone at the table that something significant had happened. The mood in the room, which moments before had been filled with hope and reconciliation, now carried an underlying tension. John, sensing the need to lighten the moment, raised his glass. "A toast," he said, his voice steady and warm, "to family, to truth, and to new beginnings." The others raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment. As they drank, each was lost in their own thoughts. Clara, observing the scene with a writer's keen eye, couldn't help but think that this Christmas Eve was unfolding like a chapter from one of her novels, full of revelations, raw emotions, and a touch of mystery. Dinner continued, the conversations flowing more easily now. Stories were shared, laughter echoed through the room, and for moments it seemed as if the wounds of the past were beginning to heal. But beneath the surface of Christmas cheer, a question lingered silently. What could that mysterious phone call have been about? And how would it affect the fragile balance they had just achieved? As the snow fell softly outside, blanketing London in white, the intertwined lives in that dining room were about to take an unexpected turn. The truth had come to light, but it seemed there were still more secrets to be revealed. Christmas dinner was over, but no one moved from the table. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. All eyes were on Evelyn, who seemed to have aged 10 years since receiving that mysterious phone call. "Mum," Amelia finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "What's going on? Who was on the phone?" Evelyn looked up, her gaze flitting between the worried faces around her. She took a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage she possessed. "It was a detective," she began, her voice trembling. "One I hired years ago, shortly after your father's death. I always felt there was something that didn't quite add up, but I could never explain what." John leaned forward, his expression serious. "What did the detective find, Evelyn?" She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories flood her mind. Flashback. 1. 15 years ago, Evelyn was tidying Peter's office when she found a strange receipt. It was from a jeweler in a neighboring town for a necklace that cost more than they could afford. When she questioned Peter about it, he quickly dismissed it, claiming it was a surprise gift for her. Evelyn accepted the explanation, though a small seed of doubt lingered. Flashback 2. 10 years ago, during one of Peter's business trips, Evelyn answered a call from a woman asking for him. The voice was young and intimate. When she mentioned the call to Peter later, he became visibly flustered, explaining that it was probably a confused client. Evelyn pretended to believe him, but the unease in her heart grew. Flashback. 5 years ago, shortly before Peter's death, Evelyn found a birthday card tucked away in Peter's drawer. It was signed with a heart and the name Isabel. When she confronted Peter, he flew into an unusual rage, accusing her of not trusting him. It was the first and only time Evelyn had ever seen him lose control like that. Back in the present, Evelyn opened her eyes, silent tears tracing paths down her cheeks. The detective found that Peter had another family, she said, her voice barely a whisper. A wife named Isabel and 2 children. In York. The revelation landed like a bombshell in the room. Amelia gasped, bringing her hands to her mouth in shock. Clara squeezed John's hand, who looked equally stunned. "But how?" Amelia managed to ask, her voice trembling. "Now how is that possible?" Evelyn shook her head sadly. "Apparently, it started as an affair almost 20 years ago. Peter met Isabel during one of his business trips. Over time, well, he built a double life." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in Amelia's mind. The frequent trips, the strange phone calls, his distant behavior in recent years. Evelyn nodded. "Tiresome, and the debts. All those mysterious debts we discovered after his death. He was supporting 2 families. Amelia, living 2 lives. The silence that followed was deafening. Each person in the room was lost in their own thoughts, trying to process this shocking revelation. It was John who finally broke the silence. "Evelyn," he said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I'm so sorry. No one should have to go through something like this." Clara, her eyes filled with tears, added, "You didn't do anything wrong, Evelyn. This is all on him." Amelia remained silent for a few more moments, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then, slowly, she stood up and walked over to where her mother was sitting. Kneeling beside her, Amelia wrapped Evelyn in a tight embrace. "Oh, Mum," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. For everything. For doubting you. For pushing you away." Evelyn returned the hug, sobbing silently into her daughter's shoulder. Years of tension, secrets, and misunderstandings seemed to melt away in that moment of connection. When they finally separated, Evelyn looked at her daughter with eyes filled with love and regret. "I should have trusted you, Amelia. I should have shared my suspicions. Maybe if we had faced this together." Amelia shook her head. "We can't change the past, Mum, but we can build a better future, together." John cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Evelyn, I know this is a huge shock, but I want you to know you're not alone. We're all here for you." Clara nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. Anything you need, we're here." Evelyn looked around the table at the faces filled with concern and support. For the first time since receiving the phone call, she felt a small spark of hope. "Thank you," she said softly. I don't know how I'm going to deal with all of this. With the idea that our whole life together was a lie." Amelia squeezed her mother's hand. "It wasn't all a lie, Mum. The love you shared, the happy moments we had as a family, that was real." John stood up, walking over to the window. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, blanketing the world in a pristine white coat. "You know," he said, turning to face the group, "sometimes life throws us curveballs we don't expect. But it's how we handle those surprises that defines who we are." He walked back to the table, his gaze sweeping over each face. "Look at us. A few weeks ago, we were all strangers, carrying our own burdens and secrets. Now, we're here, together. Maybe this revelation, as painful as it is the final piece we needed to truly heal." John's words seemed to touch something deep within each of them. Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders, as if she could finally breathe fully after years of suffocating under the weight of secrets. "You're right, John," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. "I can't change what Peter did, but I can choose how I move forward, and I want to do that with all of you by my side." Amelia hugged her mother again. "We'll be here, Mum, always." Clara raised her glass. "A toast," she proposed, "to the truth, however painful, and to the family we choose." Everyone raised their glasses, the clinking of crystal echoing through the room. As they drank, each reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The revelations of the night had shaken their worlds, but they had also strengthened the bonds between them. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the past and preparing the ground for a new beginning. Christmas, which had begun with tension and secrets, was ending with a silent promise of healing and reconciliation. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, for the first time in a long time, Evelyn, Amelia, John, and Clara felt they were exactly where they were meant to be, together, facing the future as a family. Snow fell softly on London, transforming the city into a Christmas fairy tale scene. In Trafalgar Square, where it had all begun weeks ago, Evelyn found herself once again standing before the majestic Christmas tree. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Amelia, her arm linked through her mother's, John with a serene smile on his wrinkled face, Clara holding the hand of her daughter Sophia, and Sophia herself, her eyes shining with the magic of the twinkling lights. "It's amazing how much has changed in such a short time," Evelyn murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Amelia gently squeezed her mother's arm. "Change for the better, Mum. We're together now." The two women exchanged a look laden with mutual understanding. The revelation about Peter, though painful, had been the catalyst for healing their relationship. The lies that had separated them for so long now served as the foundation for a deeper, more truthful connection. John approached, placing a comforting hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You know, Evelyn, your story, and it inspired me." Everyone turned to him, curious. "I spent years accumulating wealth," John continued, "thinking it would fill the void in my life. But it was only when I started helping others that I truly found purpose." He paused, looking at each of them before continuing. "So that's why I've decided to set up a foundation to help families with medical debt and victims of financial fraud." Evelyn gasped, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, John!" "It will be called the Evelyn Foundation," John said with a smile, "to honor the woman whose courage and resilience inspired me to do more, to be better." Clara stepped forward, her face lit up with a warm smile. "And I want to help too, Evelyn. As a lawyer, I can assist you in legally resolving all the issues left by Peter. We won't let his mistakes continue to affect your future." Evelyn was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the generosity and support she was receiving. Finally, she managed to say, I don't know how to thank all of you." "You don't need to thank us, Mum," Amelia said softly. "This is what families do. They support each other no matter what." Sophia, who had been listening quietly until then, tugged on Evelyn's coat sleeve. "Grandma Evelyn," she said. The title still felt a little strange, but wonderfully right. "Can we decorate the tree now?" Evelyn laughed, wiping away her tears. "Of course we can, sweetheart." John pulled a box of ornaments from his bag, which he had brought especially for the occasion. "I thought we could start a new tradition," he explained. One by one, they began hanging the ornaments on the tree. Each piece seemed to carry a special meaning, a promise of new beginnings. As they worked, Evelyn couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. "It's amazing," she said, "how secrets can destroy families. For years, we lived apart, hurting, all because of lies and unspoken truths." Clara nodded, hanging a golden star. "But the truth, however painful, has the power to heal, to bring us together. And forgiveness," John added, helping Sophia reach a higher branch. "Forgiveness is what truly rebuilds broken bonds." Amelia, who was adjusting a garland, paused to look at her mother. "Mum, I'm so sorry for all the years we lost, for doubting you, for pushing you away." Evelyn took her daughter's hands in hers. "Oh, my darling, I made mistakes too. The important thing is that we're here now together, and we have a whole lifetime ahead of us to make up for lost time." John smiled, watching the scene unfold. "You know, when I came to London, I was running from my past, from my own failures as a father. I never imagined I'd find a new family here." Clara moved closer to her father, wrapping him in a side hug. "And we're so glad to have you back in our lives, Dad." Sophia, ever practical, interrupted the touching moment. "The star's missing from the top," she exclaimed, pointing to the peak of the tree. John laughed, scooping the little girl into his arms. "Well spotted, Princess. How about you do the honors?" Carefully he lifted Sophia, who placed the star on top of the tree with an expression of pure concentration on her little face. When Sophia was back on the ground, everyone stepped back to admire their work. The tree shimmered, not just with lights and ornaments, but with the love and hope that had been poured into its decoration. "It's perfect," Evelyn whispered, feeling emotional again. Amelia took her mother's hand. "Like us, Mum, imperfect individually, but together. Together we're perfect." John raised his camera. "How about a picture to mark the moment?" Everyone gathered in front of the tree, genuine smiles lighting up their faces. The flash went off, capturing not just their images, but the feeling of unity and renewal that hung in the air. As the evening wore on, the square began to fill with other families, all admiring the tree and celebrating Christmas. Evelyn looked around at the people who now formed her extended family and felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Merry Christmas, everyone," she said softly. "Merry Christmas," everyone replied in unison. The snow continued to fall gently, as if heaven itself was blessing this new beginning. Evelyn knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, perhaps even relapses into old patterns, but looking at the smiling faces around her, she knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. As they walked back to John's home, arms linked and hearts full, Evelyn reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a lonely widow weeping before a Christmas tree, she now found herself at the center of a rebuilt family, united not by blood, but by love, understanding, and forgiveness. The future, once so uncertain and daunting, now shimmered with possibilities. And though the shadows of the past could never be completely erased, they would serve as reminders of how much they had grown, how much they had overcome. When they reached John's house, where a festive Christmas dinner awaited them, Evelyn paused for a moment on the doorstep. Looking up at the starlit sky, she made a silent promise to herself and to everyone she loved, that from this moment forward, there would be no more secrets, only truth, no more resentment, only forgiveness, no more loneliness, only love. With a smile on her face and peace in her heart, Evelyn stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a pristine white coat, a perfect symbol of the new beginning that awaited them all.